Hey guys, thank you for joining us for another Men's Bible Brief. This is Pastor Autry. If you can, join us on Wednesday mornings. The info is on the screen. If not, we got you covered right here on YouTube. Well, let's go ahead and join the brief in progress. God bless you.
Your hump day food for thought for the day is the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That's by George Bernard Shaw. Our speaker for today is Brother Anthony Johnson. Come on, Anthony, honor us with the word.
Thank you, Brother Carl. I appreciate it. Good morning, brothers. We are continuing our book series on The Measure of a Man by Mark Getz. And currently, we are on chapter 8. And the title of this chapter is Communicating Sensitively. Communicating sensitively. I'm not sure how or where you grew up, but in my neighborhood, if somebody called you sensitive, at times those could be fighting words. It was as if someone was calling you soft or weak. And early on in my marriage, and when me and my wife would get into these arguments, she would call me sensitive. And as you can imagine, growing up the way I did, that just escalated the situation. And in my opinion, being called sensitive was just a couple of notches below somebody talking about your mom. It was a serious thing. But as we grow and we become young adults, that word sensitivity takes on a different meaning, as well as communicating sensitively. When you get into meaningful relationships, you adjust your meaning of communicating sensitively. And you adjust again when you have children, and even more so if you're fortunate enough to have grandkids. It's just an adjustment that we make from the wisdom that God gave us. But there's a bigger adjustment some of us still need to make. Either we don't know about it, haven't considered it, or refuse to make the adjustment. And after reading chapter 8, I realized that I was in the latter category. I was refusing to make the adjustment. In chapter 8, the author talks about a man named Mike. He was the CEO of a Texas savings and loan organization, and the company that he worked for was accused of redlining minorities, which they were having discriminatory practices against minorities and different ethnic groups, and denying them mortgages, insurance loans, and other types of financial services. One weekend, he and his wife were at home having breakfast when a bus pulls up. And he hears all the commotion, and off the bus comes a cameraman, an interviewer, protesters on the front door, protesters on the lawn. They knocked on the front door, and you know how this goes. You've seen them. They're protesting, the cameras are in your face, the microphone's in your face, and before you can answer one question, they're throwing another one out at you. But this guy, Mike, saw this, and he did something that I don't think any of us would do in this climate today. He opened the door to his home, and he invited them in for coffee and wanted to have an open discussion. And some of them were skeptical at first, but eventually they came to see that he was sincere. And he told them a bit about himself and how he was concerned about the redlining and some of his own efforts to combat that. And he even told them about his faith. And during this time, he said that no one got into an argument or slammed doors. To make a long story short, after they talked, they actually thanked him for his hospitality, and they left. And that was that. And I started thinking, what if we could resolve issues like this in politics, at our jobs, with our significant others? How about just with each other as men? Communicating sensitively isn't just about some of those strategies that we learn, empathy and compassion, positive criticism. Those things are important. But this goes back to the adjustment that I mentioned earlier, when either we don't know about it, we haven't considered it, or we refuse to make the adjustment. Communicating sensitively is about being able to teach. In 2 Timothy, there's a phrase, the phrase able to teach. It's surrounded by words that describe not skills, but life qualities, avoiding arguments, being kind to people, be patient when you're falsely accused, correct those who oppose you in a gentle manner. Those are all reasonable things that we can do. Therefore, we should all be able to teach. The author gives a great quote in chapter 8, and it says that a man who is able to teach is a person who is not in bondage to himself. I'm going to repeat that. A man who is able to teach is a person who is not in bondage to himself. Some of us are holding our own self hostage. And that's what I was doing by refusing to teach. As I close, I want to tell a story real quickly about Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis. And these are two of the great jazz artists of our time. And Miles Davis had passed on now. But they were doing a show together. And Herbie Hancock is playing the keyboards, and Miles Davis plays the trumpet. And Herbie Hancock was playing, and he said as he was playing, he struck a bad chord. And to just average folks, you probably wouldn't have even noticed it. But he knew it. And he knew Miles Davis knew it. And he thought to himself, man, I've just ruined this composition. So when he struck that bad chord, he turned and he looked at Miles Davis. And Miles Davis looked at him, took a deep breath, and started to play. And he noticed that as Miles started to play, he did something different. And he made an adjustment. Afterwards, they were talking about it. And Herbie Hancock told him, man, I struck a bad chord. And Miles Davis told him, I thought you were trying something new. So I decided to come alongside you and try something new as well. And I thought together we would create a new theme. Communicating sensitively is not about proving who's right or who's wrong, pointing out something every time somebody does something wrong. And it's not about winning petty arguments. Communicating sensitively is about being able to teach and communicate in a non-threatening way or a non-defensive manner. It's not always easy, but it's worth the effort. And it can help us to avoid conflict, build trust, and show respect. It can also make us a more effective speaker and listener. More importantly, communicating sensitively is about grace. It's about when someone strikes a bad chord with us, instead of getting into a heated debate, just take a minute to listen. How many times have we listened to someone and we thought that we knew what they were going to say or knew what they were going to do, and they said something different, or they did something different? They did a new thing. So we could take a page out of Miles Davis's book when someone strikes a bad chord with us. Take a minute to listen, make your adjustment, and come alongside them. And if we do that and we communicate sensitively, we can all create a new thing together. Here are the questions. Going forward, how can we communicate sensitively with our significant others, family, and friends? Question 2, name a time when you did not communicate sensitively and the negative impact it had. And finally, the last question is regarding the quote that I read earlier. What does this quote mean to you? A man who is able to teach is a person who is not in bondage to himself. Those are the 3 discussion questions. I will put them in the chat, and I'm going to turn this back over to Brother Carl.